Um, Robert Guerrero, in my opinion, should be 1-5 in his last 6. 1-5. Now, when you look at the level of competition that's involved, you have Floyd Mayweather, you have Keith Thurman, you have Danny Garcia that he's lost to. But then when it came to the Aaron Martinez fight, in my personal opinion, he should have lost that fight. Depending on the referee, the fight should have been stopped because Guerrero, what was that, the 4th round, when he was out on his feet, and now he fights this, basically in his last 6 fights, the only solid win that he's had was against Yoshihiro Kamagai. And Yoshihiro Kamagai busted his face all up, and was laying hands on him. This CrossFit Robert Guerrero, this slugger Robert Guerrero is, he's lower than the gatekeeper. And I like him as a fighter, but something is just missing. And you would say, okay, well, he skipped over the 140-pound limit. Remember, he came back after having all that time off because of his wife was sick. He came back for Celso Gaidin, first fight at 147 pounds. I covered that fight. He had some issues. Then he fought Andre Berto. Got Andre Berto out of there, and he was able to get the Floyd Mayweather fight. And he lost to Floyd Mayweather. Then he came back after a good lengthy amount of time off because he only wanted to fight big fights. For example, remember that time where he tried to go fight Manny Pacquiao, and Richard Schaefer and Golden Boy and Al Heyman did something, and that's how he ended up getting signed with Al Heyman. And he fought Yoshihiro Kamagai, and then people say he was ducking Keith Thurman. I can understand why he wasn't fighting Keith Thurman at the time because Errol Spence is going through the same thing that Keith Thurman was going through at that point in time. I don't want to go into too much details, but I understand why he didn't fight Keith Thurman at that time. But then when he did fight Keith Thurman, it was on a high-profile, first-ever PBC card. It was a high-profile event and a very exciting fight. Then he went on to fight Aaron Martinez. A good fight to try to get a win under his belt. And he didn't look good. He won that by split decision. In my opinion, he should have lost that fight. Then, he came back and fought, he got a big fight against Danny Garcia. Lost that fight. He say he won in the first, I would say the first few rounds or 4 rounds of the fight. He was outboxing Danny Garcia, but then he just kept walking into the shots. Then he takes a little more time off, and he comes back and fights this Argentine on Spike TV. He made $500,000, where it was supposed to be a good quality, not a good quality, but a good win for him and a knockout, because the PBC on Spike cards, they're actually very good cards. And a lot of the fights that are on those cards end up in knockouts. And I already saw what the plan was. He's supposed to knock this guy out. But another question I asked during my prediction video is who's the PBC matchmaker? When they're sitting there thinking about, well, we got to get Robert Guerrero fight. Who is he going to fight? We got to get Robert Guerrero back. Who's he going to fight? Who is in that meeting yo, let's call up David Peralta. Where do they get these guys from? And you have this hungry fighter, a former cab driver, right? Well, still a cab driver. He said he was a sad-ass, depressed-ass cab driver. And those Argentine fighters have seen what Marcos Maidana has been able to do. They have seen what Lucas Matisse was able to do. And now you got Marcos Maidana, Fabian Maidana, who's getting the push. But the point I'm trying to make is this Argentine fighter, David Peralta, came over here look, I'm not fucking around with these motherfuckers, man. I'm going to get this win. And Robert Guerrero just wasn't ready, but he couldn't adjust to the style of Peralta. Peralta, if you notice, his footwork was weird, and every time he would try to, gather himself, he would have to do that little shuffle. It was weird, but the height and, the distance that he was using, was creating some major problems for Robert Guerrero. Now, it was a close fight, but when you look at, for the most part, who was controlling the fight, it was Peralta. So now we ask ourselves, well, where does Robert Guerrero go from here? And where does Peralta go from here? Now, knowing what I know about those type of fighters, he's going to get another fight on PBC against a PBC fighter. I wouldn't be surprised if it's Sammy Vasquez or Felix Diaz, or who else? Maybe Lamont Peterson. I'm talking about those mid-level PBC 147-pound guys. I believe one of those guys are going to get Peralta. Maybe Aaron Martinez. One of those guys may get a Peralta. And then if they knock him out, it's going to make it's gonna make him look real bad. Meaning Robert Guerrero, you know. So it's gonna be interesting to see where Robert Guerrero goes from here. I have my personal opinion. I know that's his father, but if I'm advising him and I'm managing him, I'm gonna say, listen, man, you know, you're 2-4 in your last 6, but you could be 1-5, you know, and maybe it's time to change trainers. I know this shit popping, you love him. He can still work in your corner, you know, as a cornerman, but maybe you need, you know, a new trainer. You gotta switch shit up. You gotta switch shit up. You know, he needs to be able to get back to being that boxer. You know, the boxer Robert Guerrero with the machine-like jab, you know, in the accurate hands. Remember how he was when he was at 126 and 130, 135. You know, he was a very, you know, like technical, you know, boxer. To where now it's this slugger hybrid. He's going through something similar that what Timothy Bradley is going through. You know, he doesn't box to his abilities. He tries to be somebody else to try to prove something. And I feel that the boxing ability did not carry up in weight with him. So, you know, I think Robert Garcia would be able to do wonders with him. You know, I think Robert Garcia would be able to do wonders with him. You know, I'm not too quite sure about Freddy Roach, because one thing about Guerrero, his defense is not bad, but his defense is all upper body. You know, all this, you know, and you know, not too much moving and dipping out of the way of punches. You know, but like I said, it's going to be interesting to see where he's going to go. They're not going to put Robert Guerrero. That's just not how Heyman works. They're not going to put Robert Guerrero in with another tough fight. You know, after losing, they're going to try to get him back on the winning ways. You know, and then put him in like another big fight like that to give him a chance. But it's like, since you lose to this caliber of fighter, making this caliber of fighter dreams come true, then who do we put you in with now? We got to go down the barrel. You know, we got to go down the barrel. You know, because now, you know, he's taking pay cuts. You know, you went from fighting on national television to now fighting on, you know, Spike TV. It's not really a bad thing that he's doing on Spike TV, but still, it's like you can see like the decrease. You know, he was being called a gatekeeper, and now losing to Peralta, what are you really now? You know, people saying, you know, Robert Guerrero, and they're going to feed him to they're saying they're going to feed him to Adrian Broner. I mean, they're going to have him fight Adrian Broner or try to feed him to Errol Spence and all that. You know. I don't think they're going to do that with him, because it's going to destroy his career if he takes another loss right now. He needs to fight 3 low-caliber guys, you know, but this was already low caliber. Hopefully he'll be able to outbox these guys, find some fat 147-pounder, you know, fight him, get some wins under your belt, and then go for that last, you know, hurrah. Go for that last hurrah. When it comes to Peralta, like I said, I feel he's probably going to fight somebody like, he may become a Diego Chavez status over here. You know, Diego Chavez is another one of those Argentine fighters that, you know, made it over here to the States and had some good fights. You know, for example, when he fought Keith Thurman, he was giving him trouble early in the fight. When he fought Brandon Rios, he was winning that fight before the DQ. When he fought Timothy Bradley, who fought Manny Pacquiao, that was a draw. Timothy Bradley in a rematch. He was on his way to fighting Kell Brook. He just fought in July in some low-class, low-tier card over in Argentina, meaning Diego Chavez. But since then, he didn't fight since fighting Timothy Bradley. But the point I'm trying to make is those Argentine fighters, you know, they're hungry. You know, those Argentine fighters are hungry. So I wouldn't be surprised if I see Peralta versus Devin Alexander. You know, Peralta versus Felix Diaz. Peralta versus Sammy Vasquez. You know, somebody along like that route. In fact, let me go look at the 147-pounders real quick and see if I'm missing any names. You know, Lamont Peterson, you know. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't see him fight like the top tier 147-pound guys. They're going to try to use Peralta. They're going to market him as the guy who beat Robert Guerrero and put him in there against, you know, lower level fighters. Anyway, I'm T-Street Controversy. This is T-Street Controversy Live. I cover every single major fight live. We're back here every day, full time now. It's really official. Stay tuned for the website, FightView360.com. And I know people are saying, you know, like this video is old. You should have did this. It was my birthday, so chill out. You know, chill out. Please subscribe.